Welcome to Your Fitness Chick podcast. Become your best self. I'm a fitness coach spreading positivity to navigate you to fitness, growth, and transformation. Hey, I'm your host, Abby Smiley Krause. I am a fitness enthusiast, a huge dog lover, especially to my babies Gigi and Layla, and I am so passionate about this amazing thing that we call life. In this podcast, I'll be covering topics to improve your fitness, mindset, and well-being. Topics such as longevity, meal prepping, overcoming mindset obstacles, nutrition, and of course, everyone's favorite, weight loss. I'm here to help inspire, uplift, educate, and motivate you to become your best self. Join me here every Tuesday for a fresh episode. Welcome to the Your Fitness Chick podcast. Become your best self. I'm your host, Abby Smiley Krause, and I am so excited and looking forward to the episode today with my friend Laura Bellamy, which I'll introduce in just a second. So Laura and I met at Venice Day Spa, which is a day spa that I work at. She became a client of mine there, and we instantly just had a good connection, a liking for one another. We're a lot alike in many, many ways, and I think that's what created that special bond and connection. And during a recent visit, we were just conversating, and we were like, oh my gosh. I was like, you should totally be on my podcast. And so here we are today. So Laura is going to give us her background. She's a therapist, and she'll key you in on the more specifics of that. But the reason why I wanted to do this episode is it's actually a topic that touches very near and dear to my heart. And it's about depression and happiness, because we're coming into the holidays, and the holidays can be rough for a lot of people. And especially if you're having challenges with depression, it can be extremely difficult. So we wanted to collaborate together on this episode to give you some tips, to educate you and help you understand if you or someone you love that's near and dear to your heart is having challenges with depression. We want to help you come over to the other side, right? So welcome, my friend, my dear, dear friend, Laura Bellamy.
Good morning.
We've had our coffee. You're good? You got your caffeination going, girl?
Yes, I'm on the third one.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I know. I'm usually a one coffee kind of girl, but
If you start shaking or having convulsions, we at least know what's going through your blood.
that's true. Very true.
All right, Laura. So tell our listeners, tell our viewers a little bit about your background.
So I am a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida and in the state of Colorado. I specialize in trauma-informed care. So everyone experiences trauma in their life. There's different variations, looks like different things to different people. But I specialize in trauma, and that entails all the ugly stuff, the sexual assault, the domestic violence, the substance use, the just PTSD, things like that people have to cope with. That, let's be real, there's a huge stigma specifically attached to those things. It can be really hard to talk about. So this is my passion in life. I love therapy. I love coming to my office every day and hearing people's stories, hearing their lives, people that they're all different walks of life and the same type of, how do I explain this? So two people can have the exact same experiences, but they're two different people. So if I get them both on my couch, they're both going to have a completely different perspective and lens on things. And I think that's beautiful because everyone is different. So I feel honored that I can sit in my office with someone and share that safe space with them where they'll say things that are like, oh, wow, I never shared that with anyone. And that's an honor for me, especially with society right now and coming into the holidays when, you know, you're having to deal with family that you may see once a year. Or,
Glad
you know,
about
a lot
that.
of people,
I'm
yes. Or
excited.
some people didn't have anyone for Thanksgiving.
Right, which is also
So trying
sadness. Both sides of the spectrum, right?
exactly.
And I think
Exactly.
the thing too that I really just want to put at the front of this is that everybody really has had some sort of trauma in their life. Like I check marked a lot of those things personally. And
Mhm.
so I think it is to say it comes people from all walks of life and it doesn't choose. So a specific type of person, everybody can experience and try to recover from stuff like that. So
Absolutely.
so with that being said, obviously when we have traumatic things happen in our life and we don't deal with them, which is what I did, because we like to we present ourselves as a badass, and I'm like, you know what, I ain't got no time for that. You know what, put that in the back pocket, just keep going forward, pretend like nothing happened, see how that works for you,
Mhm. Yeah.
because it's gonna
I'll see you on
bleed.
this one.
It's gonna bleed into all areas of your life, right?
Yeah.
So many people, when they undergo these traumas, it develops into depression, right? um
Mhm.
and I think that there's this huge societal downdrift in happiness and this huge societal uproaring of depression. What do you think is contributing to that besides the obvious facts of some traumatic events going on in people's lives?
You asking like
Why do you
what
think
might
there's such a
trigger
higher
depression?
number in today's time of people that are
Oh,
suffering from depression, people who are on depression meds, anxiety meds, things like that? Why do you think what's created this swinging up number of people that are experiencing this?
awareness. Honestly, Abby, I really think it's awareness. I really think it's awareness is what it comes down to. It's like everything else with technology. The word is able to be spread out there. The
Social
For example, the Me Too movement. Yes. The Just there's so many different things, and that is a way that people can get things out there. And unfortunately, not everything is happy. So you're being bombarded all the time. And there's also that awareness of like, we're saying there is a stigma on mental health and seeking treatment. And one thing I always tell people is our society will mourn a suicide, but more often than not, they will not address what leads up to that suicide. So just the awareness out there of like, hey, I'm seeing some signs because I'm being educated of someone starting to get rid of their things. Someone is now texting me, and it can be little things. This person is texting me once a day now. We don't call every day anymore. It really comes down to giving someone the information of these are the signs, the red flags, so to speak.
when you find somebody
These are what
withdrawing.
exactly. But there's also that aspect of survivor's guilt, of how the hell do I cope with my significant other, my mother, my best friend completing suicide? How am I supposed to cope with that? So there's all of this information out there now. So I don't think particularly it's an uptick. I think it's more people are feeling more comfortable to reach out.
I would agree with you on that because, as I shared with you right before we started the taping of this episode, um, I've suffered from clinical depression. And, I started back in 2013, I believe it was, on the first time I was on antidepressants. And
Mhm.
for me, as someone who has always been very successful, always
Mhm.
achieved, been a go getter, put myself together, I think, pretty well in society, that it was kind of embarrassing for me to be diagnosed as having depression. And I think there's a lot of people that probably feel that way too, because especially if you have a strong mindset, like you're like, I'm a badass, like I can take on the world. And, being a single mom, raising my son, and things like that, I think that, people want to hide behind that veil and not really let people know the weakness of it. because I think some people view that as a weakness. So that's why I really wanted to allow myself to be transparent. And again, for you to share this information to let people know it's okay to not be okay. And when you're looking in
Absolutely.
society and everybody thinks looks like they have their shit together, they probably don't. Right. And
Right.
so, with that being said, when you see somebody who's withdrawing, people who are getting rid of their things, and maybe you can just tell there's something not right, it can be uncomfortable for a lot of people because unless they've experienced true depression themselves, they don't know how to deal with it. And so, like, I know some people would say, just snap out of it.
Mhm.
Go do something that makes yourself
Get
happy.
over it.
But physiologically, when you're suffering from depression, it's not that easy. And that's why sometimes a prescription and therapy are the answer.
Mhm.
So with that, when you have somebody who, besides the signs from the other side, if the person who loves you is seeing someone they love starting to withdraw, let's talk more about the person firsthand. So if
Mhm.
a person is not feeling right, like if they're starting to feel off, what are some signs that people can identify that, hey, I might have something that needs help here? Am I starting to experiencing the first stages of depression? What do those look like for the person that's going through that?
And that's the thing too, Abby, is it again looks different for everybody. It look very different. Like I can use myself for an example because I'm a therapist. I'm a trauma therapist. I hear terrible things all day long. There's things in the world I cannot control. However, the biggest thing is recognizing I will notice myself when I'm starting to feel depressed. I will stop doing, and it sounds very cliche, but honestly, it's true. I will stop doing things that I enjoy. I will start ordering Instacart because I do not want to go grocery shopping. I mean, I enjoy, personally, I enjoy grocery shopping. It gives me the chance to be social. I will start ordering Instacart. I will start ordering food in to be delivered. I will stop going out. I have a girlfriend that I talk to. We text every day. I will personally notice when I'm like, wow, it's been 3 days. Like, what's going on? Like, am I busy? Is she busy or is something going on? Everyone has different signals. Others are like, wow, I can't sleep anymore, or I'm sleeping a lot, or like, wow, my anxiety is definitely more amped up, or a lot of it is trusting your gut. And like you said, something is off.
Mhm.
And that's the challenge too, is because everyone is different, you have to stop and have the mindfulness and self awareness to recognize those signs, those red flags.
Yeah, I think the main thing for me, and you just actually described me, although you said people can do it different. That's exactly how I become. And anybody who's been really close to me in my life will say, yeah, that's exactly what she did. You want to cut yourself off from society. You just become kind of a recluse. You don't want to leave your house. You will either eat too much or not eat. You'll sleep too much or
Mhm.
not sleep. And you just start to experience just this plethora of emotions from almost like, what the hell's wrong with me? Like, why am I doing this? And so it just leads to the next question, which is when you are in that depressive state, why is it that people tend to gravitate to negative behaviors? Like some of the ones I
Because
just thought,
they
also like substance abuse, drinking too much, drugs, whatever.
A lot of people will utilize sex as a tool. They'll utilize education where they'll throw themselves into work and become workaholics.
And
And
that's because they really don't want to feel, right?
exactly. Exactly. So it's just like you shove it down. You're just going to kind of continue to shove it down. Another thing I wanted to mention too about the symptoms in yourself is I will personally notice, and I can honestly tell with you, even though I see you every 4 to 6 weeks, I can walk in and tell on your face and your posture. And 80% of a conversation is through body language. Indifference is a huge one. People become indifferent. They'll become apathetic, which can look like, which I didn't know what indifferent or apathetic meant before I went to graduate school. I
Maybe
was like, what the
explain
hell
that
is
to our
that?
viewers
And
and our listeners because I'm not quite sure I even know what it is.
so apathetic and indifferent are pretty similar. It's where you just feel, honestly, the best way to describe it is bleh. Like, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to eat anything. I don't really want to see anybody. I kind of just like, bleh.
Yeah. And then the other indifferent, there is it
It's very
kind of the
similar,
same.
indifferent of just like, yeah, whatever. Okay. Like,
You
sure.
just really become robotic autopilot, just get me through the day and, let's chalk it up as a
It's
win.
that. Uh-huh. And I don't know if you've ever seen that commercial where, and I'm laughing because it's so true. It's so true. People walking around like the depression commercials where you see all the medications. And they'll carry around this smiley face on a
Yes, I've
stick
seen that.
where it's just like, yep, I'm good. I'm good. And I'm like, oh my goodness, how many people do we know that we don't know are
You
suffering?
never know. Because
No.
also, as we discussed right before starting the taping, nobody would have ever believed Abby Smiley Krause. Smiley, that's a terrible last name to have when you're depressed as hell. But was suffering from depression. People would never have known it because you do put on that happy face. And
Mhm. The pride.
and the medication did help me personally for a little bit. And I was on a pretty low, moderate dose. Like I didn't feel in a fog and stuff. Um, but later on in my life, I went through a very traumatic episode in 2018, and I was a freaking disaster. I was a train wreck, hot mess, express, dumpster fire, everything you can think of. And
Hot bad ass run over
like the
twice.
lowest point of my life. Horrific,
Yeah.
horrific. And that's a whole nother episode and about 2 books and 3 movies worth. But, I started going to therapy and I was put on just this plethora of medications.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying medications are good or bad. And I am not a doctor. And I am not saying go off your meds. I'm not saying start meds. I'm being completely neutral in that stance. But for me personally, when I went to this particular psychiatrist who prescribed
Mhm.
just this rapid fire of drugs, it made me a different person.
It didn't make you feel good,
It
did
was
it?
horrific. And I think at
Mm,
one time I think the most, I want to say I was on maybe 8 or 9 meds at one time.
that makes my heart sad, Abby.
And my sister, she came at Christmas time and it was 2018. And my sister lives out of state and she saw me and I was so like numbed up, like I wasn't even feeling anything that
You were
she
different.
looked at my mom. She says, "What the hell is this? What is wrong with her?"
Mhm.
So I think that there's a very fine line and that people have to find what works for them, right? With meds. I
Right.
mean, what is your viewpoint on medications with depression? Do you think they can be beneficial?
Honestly, the biggest thing, and again, I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I have my master's degree. So I do talk therapy. So my recommendation is to try talk therapy first because a lot of people go straight to medication. And again, you got to ask yourself, why are you going to medication? Is it to numb myself?
Right.
Is it to what is the purpose of me taking this medication? I personally feel that sometimes there are chemical imbalances in the brain that's how you're born. There's just things, little neurotransmitters that just don't do their little neurotransmitty thingies. So sometimes I know you like that science
I love it
again, not
because
a
that's what people can
scientist.
relate to.
Well, exactly. Like we're all human and I had to have it dumbed down for me, so to speak, because I'm just like I have no idea what you're saying, so I cannot give this out. But for medication, there also are like you said, you were having an incredibly difficult time in your life, so a low dose antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication worked for you. Doing mass amounts of meds at once, again, not a medical doctor. However, how many people have you heard? How many people have experienced the like, wow, I feel absolutely nothing? You can't feel depressed if you're not conscious.
Problem
You like that?
solved. Problem solved.
Exactly.
And I love
So
that clarification and your viewpoint on that
yeah.
because again, having a bachelor's in alternative medicine, although I feel conventional
Mhm.
medicine and pills are necessary sometimes, I don't think it's always the solution. And I think a lot of times there's underlying other routes that can benefit
Mhm.
us even more or just as much without any side effects, right?
And honestly, people underestimate the beauty and the power of words, and all of those things that you stuff down, that you let out. How many times have you been like, "Oh my gosh, I feel so much better now that I've done that or now that I've said that." It's just like, "Whew,
That's right.
I
There's
can
that
let
saying,
that
getting
go."
it off my chest, right?
Exactly. Verbally saying it, you can hear it. You can hear your own voice, and it's very different when something's in your own voice or it's your own idea. It's just like, "Oh, wow, okay."
Because when you do say it out loud, sometimes it makes
Mhm.
it real. And
Have you ever heard yourself say like, "Wow, that sounds really stupid," out loud?
yes,
Exactly. You say it out loud and you're like, "Whoa, how was that a rational thought?"
yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of times when you do say it out loud, it does set you free. It cuts the chain because there's a shame too, I think, for a lot of people when they're keeping these thoughts, these emotions, these feelings that they're not quite sure what even to do with them, that once they
Mhm.
purge it out, it kind of all comes together, right?
Right.
From somebody who,
Mhm.
like you, is a very easy person to talk to, non-judgmental, obviously helping people on their path to healing, because that's ultimately what we're trying to do when we're doing the talk therapy, is heal through the issue. Because you made a really good point I want to bring up here too before we started the taping, is that when you have a challenge with mental illness, depression, trauma, whatever, it's not who you are, right? It's not
Mhm.
what defines you. It's something that you're dealing with, that you're trying to find your way through so that you can continue to develop into your best possible self, right?
Oh, exactly.
So, what would you say is the most challenging thing for people who might be on the fence about therapy? Because I think also some people view therapy as a weakness. I know some
Abs
people, I won't say specific names, people very close in my family who need therapy like a son of a biscuit, but
Mhm.
because they don't believe in it, or they feel like if you go to therapy, that means you're weak.
Mm.
How would you educate someone that how therapy could be beneficial for them? Talk therapy.
Honestly, that's a really difficult question. I'm trying to think back when I finally decided, like, okay, I need to go to therapy. Like, I'm not weak. And I think it was when I realized, like, it's okay to not be perfect.
That's
Like,
what I was looking
I've
for.
always been, exactly. I don't have to be perfect. I was active duty Air Force for 8 years.
Amazing.
So as a woman, let's be real, military is this dominated by males. So it was just, I had to be the strong female. I had to be the example. I had to be fitter than everyone else. I had to be smarter than everyone else. I had to be stronger physically, which I am not. Yeah, not the strongest person ever, which is fine. Yeah, whatever.
But this is
But
because
I
you're a
was like,
perfectionist and working in a
uh-huh.
male environment, you do feel like you have to
Mhm.
set the bar a little higher, right?
Right. And it's not even just that's just my own personal experience, but that can go so different for so many different people. Of just like, I mean, it's weakness. Like you said, it's weakness. But when you stop and ask yourself, questioning those thoughts of like, why is it weakness? Is it weakness because someone's going to judge me? Okay, well, if they judge me, what will happen?
Right.
Okay, they may not like
Ask.
me. Okay, well, what happens if they don't like me? Am I going to fall apart? Am I going to be sad? Challenging those thoughts in your brain is really important because when you start getting down to that, you're like, that's why I feel like crap. Or like, hey, maybe this is something that I need to bring up to somebody else. Not every therapist, I'm not going to be everyone's cup of tea or shot of tequila or whatever, however you want to say that. And I'm very honest with my clients. I offer a 15-minute consult of like, hey, if you're not feeling me or I'm not feeling you and this isn't working, like that's okay.
Yeah.
I
Side
very
with each
much
other.
encourage. Right. I very, very much encourage people when they're reaching out for therapists, do your research. Do your research on that therapist. Look at their credentials, look at all of those things. Honestly, looking at a picture because we eat with our eyes first. It sounds really silly, but if you look at someone and you're like, wow, that looks like someone I could really open up to, that someone I could feel comfortable with. People get very discouraged when they go to a therapist when they finally get the strength to realize it's not weakness and go to a therapist and they don't have that match, they don't have that connection. It's just kind of like, well, see, told you, therapy didn't work.
Yeah, that's actually a really, really good point because I have been to therapy before, uh, several times for,
Mm-hmm.
many reasons, but I can tell you, you just hit the nail on the head because there were several that I went to and I'm like I just felt like not
Ooh.
connected. I felt like they weren't really genuine. I don't feel like they
Mm-hmm.
were even listening to me. I feel like they were just like shaking their head. I mean, allowing me to be heard, but like not engaging. I just didn't feel connection to that person. But then I've also had people that are like you that are very warm and welcoming and just would be super easy to talk to. So I think that is something you can't go to school for, right? You
Yep.
could have your PhD, but still not be a what they call warm, fuzzy person, right?
Yes.
So that you're just a definite asset in that capacity. Well, let's switch gears for a second. Let's talk about genetic predisposition. Okay.
Mm.
Because when you have depression, or when you're suffering from stuff like that, any kind of mental illness, how strongly do you feel that can be in your bloodline?
Oh, so strongly. Again, not a scientist. However, I've working as a trauma specialist, I have looked into generational trauma and done research on generational trauma. And there is science and evidence-based research out there that shows that chemical imbalances, whether it's due to a trauma or just a chemical imbalance in the brain that just didn't form like it was supposed to. I absolutely believe that some people are born that way. Like chemicals just don't do what they're supposed to do. So I absolutely believe that that is a thing. And there is the research to show, there's research to show that, for example, people that generational trauma um, goes back to when people, I'll use an example when I'm Italian. So when my great grandparents came over from Italy, they were put into, into the section and they were just kind of like, segregation, Italian and Irish. That's where they were for years until they migrated out. So the being very close to family, being very tight knit on finances, those things like that, being in constant stress because you can't eat, you can't feed your family, you can barely keep a roof over your head. Those things like that can affect brain chemicals, honestly, and so that can absolutely be passed down. Another perfect example, I know I use myself, but honestly, I do it with clients too. I feel it's important as a therapist, but also as a human, because I'm a human at the end of the day. I experience things like everyone else. So I try to be very transparent because I want people to be able to relate. Because if you can't relate, then what the hell are we doing here?
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
but with genetics, so I could, when I was in graduate school, I was learning about generational trauma and how that can be passed down. But also, it doesn't even have to be traumatic, it can just be chemical imbalances that are passed down through genetics. For example, when I was in graduate school, I did a genogram, which is similar to a family tree, but you're more tracking mental health, so to speak.
Oh,
So I was able to track depression, bipolar disorder, severe anxiety, all the way up my mother's side of the family on the women's side to my great grandmother
oh, wow.
in the early 20s, math in public. I can't remember. Yes, great grandmother. So yes, early 20s.
Wow. That would have
So
to
I'm
be really
able to track
interesting.
that. Isn't that nuts?
Yeah. No pun intended.
And I'm sure there's, yeah, I'm sure there's more in there somewhere, but it's just another thing I wanted to put there, Abby, is my family was very, very upset with me when, mind you, this was a project I had to do for graduate school. Like it wasn't a choice.
Oh,
I needed to do it to graduate. When I started poking around for information, naively, not thinking about all this horrible stuff that has happened in my family, like everyone else, because there's secrets we don't talk about. We don't talk about those things. We don't talk about cousin Vinny who went off the deep end and
right,
did the things.
right.
Um, but they were very, very upset with me because they're like, well, why do you want to know that? Because there's that stigma associated with it. especially with the men. And it's also another thing that I tracked in my family. I won't go which generation, just in case any of my family listens to this,
Right.
but I was able to track women in my family that married abusive men. So, women in my family specifically that had some sort of mental diagnosis were married or had been with some form of a domestic violence relationship where there was some sort of substance use.
Interesting.
I was able to track that 3 generations, Abby. 3
That's crazy.
generations. And it was just, and then you would see like the like grandma, grandpa would have these kids, and then the son would be just like grandpa, who would then go and get married to someone who had a depressive depressive diagnosis. So you can literally see like, oh my gosh. So breaking the cycle is another thing in our society right now, is breaking that cycle.
And I love that because that's going to be the segue into the next segment I want to talk about is, yeah, I think, definitely if you take yourself out of the equation and you emotionally detach yourself from your family for a second and you look into it really good, everybody's family has some people that have experienced some challenges, right?
Mhm.
And it's not to say, anything of weakness or to be embarrassed or shame. It's just genetically something that occurs with the chemical depletion, imbalance, whatever. But where I'm going with this is the topic of epigenetics, right? So
Mhm.
epigenetics is a big buzzword. I'm going to be talking about it a lot in future episodes. But epigenetics is when we have the capacity to alter our genetics, right? Based on environmental factors, based on lifestyle choices and things that we choose to do. So, with
Mhm.
that, as somebody who was suffering from depression, who was on medication, who I'm very happy to say I haven't taken any meds. I've been off meds for 3 years, I think now. And again, I'm not saying don't take your meds. It served its purpose for me. And then I decided for me, working out, eating good, decreasing alcohol in my life because I was abusing it,
Mhm.
and doing it more in moderation now. That with that, the epigenetics on the role of fitness and nutrition. Obviously, as your fitness chick, I want to talk about that for a second. So when I
Mhm.
started getting back into working out after coming out of a pretty bad depressive situation in my life, I can't tell you the amount of changes that it took on physiologically within me. So obviously decreasing your alcohol consumption, which alters your brain chemistry tremendously. A lot of people don't realize how much that manipulates, especially if you have challenges with depression. Alcohol is a depressant. Hello. And if you're on an antidepressant and you're drinking a depressant, how's that going to work out for
Very
you?
functional.
It's not going to do you good. So by taking control of what we can control, yeah, we can't control if we have those imbalances, but by starting behaviors that will help balance it out makes more sense, right? So by working out, we're releasing those feel good chemicals when you're nourishing your body with good food. Obviously, when you become physically tired from working out, because I think, I talk about the LYs a lot, becoming your best self. It's not just working out. It's
Mhm.
the LYs, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, all those things, physically, obviously. But when you're tired from working out, you're going to sleep better, which sleep is a huge issue with people suffering from depression.
It is.
So how would you say how important fitness and nutrition is for somebody? I mean, obviously it helps me, but I think there's no denying the fact that you're releasing those good chemicals when you work out that are going to help you
Oh, yeah.
fight depression, right?
Your happy chemicals and how to hack them. I know where you can't see in my office, but I've got several things because I'm that therapist. I've, especially being in the military and working with the Army as an Air Force chick, like you got to have a morbid sense of humor and you got to be able to go there. And I work with a lot of veterans, not all veterans, but being a vet, vets tend to gravitate. So just you have to have that morbid sense of humor and just laugh at shit, because if you don't, it will drive you crazy. So I have a sign behind my head and it says, "Relax, we're all crazy. It's not a competition." Because it's so true. It is not a competition. People are like, oh, well, my spouse has paranoid schizophrenia, which is actually quite rare. It's another thing that people overuse. Bipolar, schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenia specifically, things like that. And it's just like the lack of education behind it is just, it's difficult because it could be that person that's suffering from depression on the street that you see that is like talking to themselves and throwing their hands around. They could have some form of depression and are utilizing substances, which can very much mimic paranoid schizophrenia or those
Right.
things that we see out in public. We're like, ooh, crazy pants. And it's just like, you have to stop long enough and think, how did you get there?
Right. And is it truly what you are, or is the medication creating that? Right. Because
Exactly. But the happy chemicals that we were talking about that you had mentioned with fitness, your dopamine, your oxytocin, your serotonin, your endorphins, a lot of those things can be triggered or things you can experience through exercise and eating well. There is that brain gut connection. That's another really important part that I feel like should be mentioned because you said fitness, eating well, drinking more water, cutting back soda, alcohol, things like that. When you cut those back, it gives your body a chance to experience those happy things. Because when we're numbing ourselves, we can't feel happy or sad. That's where that indifference comes in. Because it's like, I'd rather feel nothing
correct.
than what it is I'm feeling.
Exactly.
So when you're exercising, you're releasing serotonin, which is your mood stabilizer. So a thing that is in a lot of antidepressants is serotonin, SSRIs, SNRIs, things like that. Endorphins, the painkiller. So laughing, exercising, listen, even smelling essential oils is, I know it sounds super silly and I'm not like, yes, the essential oils will cure cancer, but I have essential oils and diffusers in my
Yeah.
office because
Yep.
the smell is
Sure.
relaxing. So it's just those things, even something like stretching in between clients when I'm in back-to-back sessions, which is pretty frequently. In between sessions, I will do a couple push-ups or I will do some yoga poses, just something to get my body moving because it makes me feel better. It releases things like when you complete a task or you do some sort of self-care or coping skill, it releases that dopamine. Fitness can help release all of those things in a variety of different ways.
And I think that that is really great. Some of those other things that you mentioned, because one of the questions I was going to ask you, my dog Gigi wants to join. She wanted to join the episode. Look how sweet my
Oh
baby
my,
is.
look at that little, oh, looks like a
She's
mustache.
always hiding up in here. But
Oh,
one of the questions I was going to ask you is, being that we are coming into the holidays and a lot of people do suffer from the holiday blues, either because they're alone or it can also be a very stressful time that can trigger depression just due to finances, which that's my episode next week. I'm talking with some guy about finances, but obviously the stress of buying Christmas gifts, you see a lot of memes on Facebook that's like, Christmas looks like everybody's getting hugs this year because, to joke about it, but it's a very stressful time for a lot of people that can actually trigger people into a high state of depression and blues. So besides some of the things that you just mentioned, which would be like, incorporating essential oils, obviously fitness, nutrition, good nutrition, what are some other things that people could do to help fight off the holiday blues and depression that is common around this time of year?
I'm so glad you asked that, Abby. Again, you can't see me, but this is my dream job. This is my passion. I absolutely love this. So
People
if
on
I get
YouTube
on
will
a
be able to
tangent,
see this because this will be on YouTube too. So
will it really?
yeah, so this will be able to be watched. So if you're listening to this on Spotify, you can go to Your Fitness Check on YouTube to watch the visuals Laura's getting ready to share with us.
I'm so excited. I didn't realize you were,
Yeah,
I got everything
yeah,
already.
yeah.
Okay. So,
So
where
show
is
away,
my
girl.
sign? Okay, so I have what's called the toolbox in my
Okay.
office. It is pretty much a giant pretty box that I got from Michael's that's obnoxiously huge. So when you walk into my office, you can see it. There's no like, it's very apparent. And I do that because I want people to be drawn to it because they're like, ooh, what's in here? And when we talk about coping skills and all of those things to help take care of ourselves, which before we get into this, I want to talk about the difference between coping skills and self care. Those are two different things. So self-care is more long-term. It's eating well. It's a lifestyle change. It's working out and fitness. Excuse me. It's the long-term things.
Okay.
So it can even be getting your nails done, so to speak, for some,
Right.
because it is a coping skill to do the actual activity, but it's also longer lasting of being like, oh, or you get compliments. Oh, look how pretty my nails are. Or with men with a haircut, when people know, like, oh, you noticed.
Yeah.
Things like
Physical
that.
things, massages, facials, you know.
Exactly. Stuff like that. Then you've got your coping skills, which are perfect example. Like my little diffuser, which I have a fancy one now because I invested in myself.
Treat
Self
yourself.
care.
Treat yourself.
I invested in and it's little things like this. It was $9, $9 or $10 at Walmart.
Right.
It came with some of the oils.
Okay.
It didn't last forever. It lasts a couple hours, but it was just one of those like self-care things of like, oh, lavender. And it will bring back like, oh, that feels good, because your olfactory system, your sense of smell is most connected with your memory, which is why smells can be triggers. So putting something in your environment that smells good can be really important. So when you're having that like moment, like this morning when I woke up and had 3 cups of coffee,
Which
I've
causes
got
more
lavender.
anxiety because of high caffeine, right?
Yep. I've got my eucalyptus and lavender that's in there. So I'm like, oh, my eyeballs are vibrating, but I can have a conversation. And so coping skills are the shorter things like essential oils. Don't laugh, but I got this crazy idea one day. It was a shower thought. You're welcome. I bought Play-Doh. So, being a trauma therapist, the whole thing with using both hands at the same time is when you're stimulating both sides of your brain, it mimics REM sleep when you're sleeping. During REM sleep, all of those little boxes where your brain's sorting the memories go to. So, if you're not sleeping well, that's a problem. If you're not eating well, that's a problem. It mimics REM sleep. So it will help you, for example, Play-Doh.
Okay.
I've got a ton. I've got because I do have a lot of men as well. And men, if you're listening to this, I have more male clients than female
Oh,
clients. And
that's interesting.
yes, it is. And I wanted to mention that because it's very, very important, because most of my men are just like, I didn't know what to do. I was at the end of my rope and I couldn't do this anymore. Like, I'm a man. No one gives a shit about my feelings, because in
It is
society,
hard
that's
for
how it is.
men.
People get so focused on women that it's just like, don't forget our dudes. Like, our dudes have feelings too. Our men need help too.
Yeah. And I think it's especially
So,
hard. Let's just insert in this little thing that for men, obviously,
mhm,
have always been the one who's supposed to be the provider, the strong one in the family, and all that. So it does make it
yeah.
harder, I think, for men to seek help. But I'm glad you're opening the door and letting them know that that's something they should do.
It's okay. And men, it's okay to be not okay too. It doesn't make you any less of a man. It doesn't make
You're
you
human.
weak. It doesn't do any of those things. If anything, it makes you a stronger human because it helps you grow as a person. That's how I see therapy. You're in a constant growing. If you're not growing, what are we doing?
Yeah,
And men deserve to be supported and grown as much as women do, as much as anyone else in the world does.
100%.
So, just the men out there, I have Play-Doh for you too.
So what do we do with
So I have
Play-Doh? What do we do with it?
so Play-Doh. Okay, so I was telling you it simulates REM sleep. So when again, trauma therapist, so when I am processing a trauma with a client, which I don't do until we have a very firm, another thing, everyone, unless you have a firm foundation of coping skills, please do not process any trauma, because you won't be able, more often than not, has nothing to do with you. You won't be able to manage it because you don't have those skills yet. You have to have that foundation. So, building that foundation, when we finally do get to the point, which of course I can't get this out. There we go. So, utilizing both, oh, it matches my
I just
shirt.
saw
That
that.
was
Well,
totally
well
not
played,
intended.
Laura. I like that.
Winning. So when you're doing this, you don't have to look at someone. I have a lot of people, when you're talking about something yucky, how often do you want to look into their eyeballs and see their judgment, so to speak, because that's what you'll tell yourself.
Right.
So you can look off and you're rubbing your hands together and you're feeling this Play-Doh and you're smelling this Play-Doh. And it's almost like it's nostalgic in a form for a lot of us, but it's also like it taps into our kid of
Inner
like
child.
safety. It's safe. It's okay. I'm allowed to play with Play-Doh. Like, I'm 36 years old and I play with Play-Doh. I color in. Another thing with coping skills. I have clients will spend the entire hour coloring.
Oh, I love that.
And I know it sounds really silly, but I get to know my clients the best when they are doing something with their hands, or when they're coloring, or when they're playing with Play-Doh, or, like all different types of, I love colored
Yeah.
pencils. That's what I find people gravitate to the most. They're like, crayons, really? But I've got these, and granted, when I'm doing these coloring things, I'm paying, as a therapist, I'm paying attention to what coloring book you are pulling out of my box, what colors you're using, what picture did you choose and why? What do you want to do with this picture when it's done? How do you feel about your coloring? Is it outside of the lines? Is it perfect? And just so I address that. So we're not just coloring, we're not just talking. I'm getting to know this
That says a
person.
lot.
They picked green because as a kid, they loved being in their room playing video games, and that was the color of their room. Or someone, I hate red, so like I avoid red at all costs. I mean, not me personally, but everyone's got their own things, but just paying attention and being mindful of like, oh, that's why I chose green. But I've got for those, because, again, not politically correct. So when I get some of my different clients that don't appreciate the we're all crazy or my coloring book, maybe swearing will help.
I love it
I
already.
give I have my healing quotes, which instead of, let's see, look at all the fucks I give
I love it. I love it.
into oh, I can't even read some of these. The endings won't end you. So it depends on the client.
You know what's really
It
funny?
depends
My
on the
friend Jen
client.
got me. I wish it's over there on my coffee table. I wish I had it. But for my birthday, she got me something that looks a lot like one of these. I can't remember what it says, but it's something about swear words because those who know me well know. I'm sorry. I do
Oh yeah.
think it's a very good thing to do sometimes. So it's a swear word coloring book, and then she got me colored pencils.
Oh, it's awesome. Some clients just crack up because some clients will be like, "Oh, I was never allowed to curse as a kid. Like, I'm going to say fuck for the rest of this. I'm going to use it every chance I get." And you know what? If that's what that client needs, I will gladly provide that for you. I have a new client that again, I meet them where they're at. Everybody's different. I don't have to believe in what you believe in. I don't have to see things the way you do. That is not why I'm here. I'm here to help you grow. I'm not here to put my things on you. So I have a client that I see now, and his faith is incredibly important to him. So we pray. Is that awkward for me? Not gonna lie, a little bit. I'm not the religious person. However, in that moment when we're praying, I step back and be like, why are you uncomfortable? This person is trusting you with something that is important to
Right.
them. And I think as people, we tend to lose that because, well, you're different than me. You are on this side, you're on that side. And we forget that we're all humans. We are all humans.
Right. Well, I love that. So that's a lot of really good information. So people, when you're starting to feel a little down during the holidays, we want to get really good at practicing self-care, right? Like your massages, facials, things that make you feel good, buying a new shirt, things that make you feel good on the outside so that you feel good, right, on the inside. And then coping stuff that's more quick fix than not long term. So that's going to be like your coloring books, your Play-Doh, what maybe a stress ball, things that
Honestly, Pop
temporarily
Rocks.
distract you, right? Okay. So, let's just wrap up by talking just a little bit real quickly about some more with you, Laura, because just during the year and a half or so that I've known you, you've had a nice little weight loss, right? How much did you lose in the last year and a half?
42 pounds.
42 pounds. That's a lot of weight. Now,
It is. I didn't even know I was carrying that.
you what? I'm sorry.
I didn't even realize I was
It
carrying
crept
that.
up on
My
you
joint
like it
did.
does a lot of people, right? So how did you
Yep.
lose it? What was your secret to losing weight? And how long did it take you?
Ah, that is a good question. So you honestly started my drive because I moved to Florida after I got out of the military, and I have always struggled with my weight. I am an emotional eater. That is something that I've worked on that it took me a while to recognize. But looking back, I have struggled over the years with weight. There'd be sometimes I would be perfectly healthy, but I would be so depressed. And then other times I'd be fat and chunky, and as I like to call myself, soft and voluptuous. That's how I say something nice about myself, which is also important to say out
Right.
loud.
I like that.
Um, so once I got down here, it was just I didn't feel good about myself, which is why I went to Venice Day Spa,
Oh,
because I was like, I'm gonna find a coping skill. I'm gonna get a facial and get my eyebrows waxed because that's what I'm gonna do. And you were just like, I was in a really rough spot in my
which you
life,
would never have
and it was
known.
just because I am that military girl that just moved across the country with her family, and I am doing all of these things. Look how strong I am. Whew, no, not at all. Because our first time, I'm pretty sure I cried, and not because my eyebrow
Yeah,
hair was being ripped out
I
of my
think I'm
face.
recalling that. Yeah, I actually remember now you
Yes,
did.
yes, and we both just word vomited the whole time about our lives, and it was just so inspiring to see, like, holy crap, this person just this beautiful human that I just met is like also a person you never would have known was suffering, because depression is not biased. It's not sexist. It's not racist. Doesn't care what you do or who you are.
Yeah.
That's the thing about depression. It doesn't choose. So when I met you, it was just such an awesome thing to be like, wow, here's a woman that came out of a yucky situation and is just like balls to walls, so to speak, of like, I am going to make myself better. I am going to do this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to grow. And that was just like, wow, a strong, I hate coming back to the woman part, but it's true. The strong woman in me was like, wow, I can be Abby. I can be
You
like
can do it.
Abby.
I
I
can
can
do it
feel
too.
good. Yes, exactly. So you started that. So I remember asking you, like, what do I do? How do I even start this? And portion control. Honestly, being mindful and having portion control.
That's awesome. And, and
And
and you were also, though, with that, you were working towards realigning a little recreation of yourself, which I think,
yes.
we all go through ebbs and flows of life where we kind of lose touch with who we are because we maybe get caught up in a relationship, or we get caught up in motherhood or fatherhood or whatever. And we just go through life and then we realize, wait a minute, there's a disconnect going on here. Which would
Mhm.
probably have made you gain some of the weight, right? Unknowingly,
Exactly.
even that you said it crept up on you. So you
Oh
were
yeah.
finding your way back to Laura. And
I was.
so
I
I
didn't know
think,
who I was anymore.
what's that?
I didn't know who I was anymore.
So I think as you were finding more joy replacement in your life, that weight kind of goes with that, right? Because as you start feeling good and feeling better, it's what keeps you going. It's like, I know with a lot of my weight loss clients, they just need to get, I always say, don't look at the whole staircase, look at the few steps in front of you. And once you
Mhm.
lose 5 pounds, let's celebrate that win. And now you're like, yeah, I can do it. I can keep going. And I think that's probably what
Mhm.
happened with you, because 42 pounds, that's a lot of weight.
It is. And I didn't lose it overnight. And a lot of people are like, oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I'm like, I've been doing it for, let me see. When I started seeing you, it was April of last
Yeah,
year. So year and a half, about a little
a
over a
great
year and a
safe
half.
space.
And just in the past month, and I hate to say goal weight because it wasn't what I was shooting for. I more just wanted to feel good. So I actually avoided the scale because for me personally, that was just really difficult for
Yeah,
me, and everybody's
yeah,
different. But when I did eventually step on it and be like, oh, when I stepped on it, it's because I started noticing a different in my
yeah.
face, a different in my digestive tract because the brain body connection. So if you're mentally not feeling okay, your happy chemicals aren't really happening. So your digestive tract isn't working right. You probably have high cortisol levels, which can increase your chance of heart disease. There's so many things wrapped around that. And it was my husband started working in a hospital and I started seeing that. He's working in the cardiac unit. And I'm like, oh, wow, there are so many overweight people that it was blowing my mind of like, I am in the same position. Like, why am I not taking care of myself? Why do I not love myself? Why do I not look in the mirror and be like, you got it today? And that's what I do now. But it took a year and a half and it was a slow process. And it's just in the last 4 weeks where I'm like, damn, I feel good. I don't do the typical gym exercises. I do yoga. I do lots of stretching. I do lots of walking.
Yeah.
15 to 20 minutes a day of sunlight, everybody. So that is pretty much what your body needs, what your brain
Vitamin
needs, the
D.
dose of vitamin D. Yes. So I will walk around. Granted, I have a very tiny building I work in. I will walk around 3 or 4 times and stop and look at the trees or stop and look at this and just being mindful of the surroundings. So when I go back into my setting, I'm like, whew, okay, I'm regrounded, so to speak.
And I love,
So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
it was just a lot of practice.
And I love
And
that
it was
because
difficult.
people have to realize that when you're talking about fitness, there's so many different avenues. And the key to success is number one, finding something you enjoy that you can stay consistent at. Because if you're doing something, if you don't like doing certain things, if you hate CrossFit, if you hate lifting weights, which I would tell you to still do that just because you need it as you know,
It's important.
you do. But, do the things you really love, like walking, like being outside. And that way you can stay consistent and continue to maintain your health. So, Laura, what do you want the biggest takeaway to be for our listeners and viewers today?
Oh, self-acceptance, self-love, um, just taking care of yourself and your whole health. My idea of therapy is whole health, mind, body. Something a client said to me years ago in internship was, I want myself to be happy, healthy, safe, and sane.
Ooh, I like
If I
that.
can provide that for me, isn't it awesome? And I was just like, wow, that literally covers everything.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted people to take away, because we talk about laughter, we have to joke about it because it makes things easier to talk about. It's like, oh, that's really uncomfortable. Let's joke about it. But you're still talking about it.
Right.
And I have these affirmation cards that I will give to clients and have them go through and pick. But one I found today that really made me think of you, um, that I wanted to kind of put out there for everyone. This one, it's got a little book and
Oh,
donut,
I got it. It's donut. I love
and it says,
donuts.
life is art. I see my entire life as a work of art, and I choose to be the artist creating it. Rather than sit around as a passive audience member, I pick up a pen and write my own story. That means every day is an act of creation as I constantly strive to be the sort of hero who fearlessly follows their bliss, curates beautiful, non toxic relationships, and almost always resists having a donut.
I love that. You got to eat the donut every now and again.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
you've got to be the director of your life. And as someone who was in some serious depression, when you're in that so deep, it's hard. It's so hard to pull yourself out of it. And I almost get a little teary eyed because it was like living in hell when you're in
Yeah.
such a deep state like that. Um, but what I want to conclude with that is you are the director of your life. And that's what you have to remember. And even on those days when it's hard, like when you don't want to shower, you don't want to leave your house, you don't want to talk to anybody, all those things, you have to just take one step. Do
Mhm.
one step. I mean, go through your process, do what you need to do. If you are feeling suicidal, obviously you need to reach out to somebody, but you just have to know in your heart that you deserve happiness and that you have to just try. You have to try one thing every day,
Mhm.
even if it's take a shower or whatever, one thing, because the next day, maybe you can do two things. The next day, maybe you can do three things. And before you know it,
Mhm.
you're getting back on track. So, Laura,
Mhm.
how can people reach out to you? Do you offer uh, counseling like what we're doing now so people could do it virtually? And then
Yes,
if you can do it virtually, and then also you're located in Port Charlotte, correct?
yes, my office is in Port Charlotte. I do live in Venice, but there was a much more there was population down here in this not specific area, but it was most needed in this area. So I don't see specifically just veterans. I have a high veteran caseload, but I see everybody because again, life depression is not biased.
Right.
Um, so I can do 15-minute consults. Honestly, if you just want to have a conversation with a human and just get some education or just get some resources, I may not always be able to fit people into my schedule, but I want people to know that if you ever need help, when you are in, this is what gets me, and I'm probably going to cry because everyone has been in that hole where it's just all the way at the bottom and you're all by yourself. And it feels so deep. And sometimes you can't pull yourself out, but it is okay to reach up and ask for someone to help you
Mm-hmm.
or ask someone to sit in that hole with you for a little bit until you're ready. Until you're ready to get out. Because until you're ready, it's not going to happen. And that is okay too.
Right. Well, I am so glad. I know that you do take some insurances, and I'll be sure to put Laura's contact info in the show notes. So if you want to reach out to her, obviously you guys, I'm sure, can get a good feel with what a good, genuine, wonderful person she could be in assisting you if you're having any challenges with trauma, depression, whatever. So thank you, Laura, so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I think this was wonderful. We might have to do a repeat part 2. But thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to help others and inspire us to become better.
Thanks,
Thank
Abby.
you. So thank you guys for tuning into this episode of the Your Fitness Chick podcast. As always, I'm here to inspire, uplift, educate, and motivate you to become your best self. I'll see you here next Tuesday for a new episode. Hey, it's Abby, your fitness chick. Thanks for checking out today's episode. With your continued support, I can keep creating inspiring episodes just like this one. So be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. To stay motivated all week long, be sure to follow me on all my social media platforms. The links for those can be found in the show notes. Check out my website by visiting www.yourfitnesschick.com. And I'd like to thank my production company, Coraggio Media, but most of all you, my listeners, for helping to inspire me each and every day. I'll see you on the next episode.